脑人言，
好，大家上午好，晚上好。非常欢迎来到我们这个 Neureport 第93期。我是 UCSD 的博士后朱正刚。今天我们非常荣幸邀请到龚生博士。龚生呢，他本科毕业于吉林大学，然后博士阶段呢在 Case Western Reserve University 开展研究，主要呢围绕这个纹状体环路多巴胺信号的一个编码机制。然后呢，现在在Harvard Hughes Medical Institute Geneva Research Campus，然后 Josh Dudman 实验室从事博士后研究，重点呢是研究多巴胺的功能。今天呢非常荣幸邀请呢生为我们介绍他最近发表在 Science 上的工作，题目叫 Reward Magnitude Determines Reinforcement Learning Efficiency。下面让我们热烈欢迎生，please take it over。
OK，
可以开始。
很感谢那个郑刚和整个那个 team 的邀请，然后如果大家中间有什么问题，可以然后随时停下来，然后来问我问题，然后我会尽量回答大家的问题。OK，let's get started. So the topic or the talk or the today's topic is about how reward magnitude determine the reinforcement learning efficiency. So like imaging elk like roaming through the Colorado mountain. So every day it faces these countless decisions. So where to search for foods, where to find water, and which paths are safest from the predator. So those choices are not random. So through experiments, the elk learn which action learn to the favorable outcome, and that behavior that produce rewarding consequences are stressed, while less successful behavior are gradually disappear. So in this way, the reward continue shape the future behaviors. So the same principle also apply to humans. So consider the recent World Cup. So these elite football players compete in the football. So their performance is not built from a single event. So they are through thousands of hours practice. So every successful pass, like every goal or every well-executed behaviors provide feedback that can reinforce effective learning. So while in the meantime, those mistakes provide information that guide future improvements. This also apply extend to the recent AI because, for example, like in robots, learn to manipulate objects. So by receiving the feedback about whether their action were succeed or failed. So by identify which action produce better outcome, AI system can gradually improve their behaviors. So across human, animal, and machines, reward can guide learning. But one of the questions is like, how does the brain transform the reward experience into last change in behavior? So reward is not a single process. So instead, it serves multiple functions in the brain. So first, rewards act as a teaching signal. So it allow animal or human to associate the action or cue with the positive outcome, and it can update the future behavior based on experiments. And second, reward influence motivation. So for example, the expectation of the rewards determine how much effort an animal or human is willing to invest and how vigorously it engage in the behaviors. And third, reward had a hedonic components, which refer to the pleasurable experience of the reward itself. So all those three processes are close related. They reflect different aspects of rewarding processing. So I will mainly focus on learning and motivation. I think Zhenggang has a nice paper on the hedonic effect of the dopamine system, and I will mainly focus on the first two components, learning and motivation. So learning is like experience-dependent and aspect, and it involves some internal representations, and such as value or action policy, and it's based on the outcome. In the other hand, motivation is reflects some internal state of the animal, and it can determine the willingness or the vigor to perform a behavior at a particular moment. So in this talk, I will mainly focus on learning, functional rewards, and ask how the reward signal influence the learning efficiency. So a major breakthrough in understanding that reward learning came from this discovery back in like 1990s. by Schultz and others, what they find is that when they record dopamine neuron in the midbrain, in this case, while monkey were performing in a Pavlovian conditioned task. So before learning, an unexpected reward produce a strong burst of dopamine activity. So and after animal learning that a cue can predict the rewards, dopamine activity shift from the reward itself to the predict cue. So when an unexpected reward was omitted, dopamine activity decreased, and this represents a negative prediction error. So here dopamine activity reflects the difference between what is expected and what actually occur. So how does the dopamine signal modify downstream circuitry to change behavior? So the striatum receive dense dopaminergic inputs, and there are mainly contain two population of neurons, D1 and D2 neurons. Because these neurons have different receptor, which have different properties, so change the dopamine level can have opposing effect on striatum pathways here. So for example, when increase dopamine level, it can enhance the D1 media pathway. So you can, in this case, it can reinforce action. However, when decrease in dopamine, it can influence the D2 media pathway involved in learning from negative outcome. So this suggests that increase and decrease in dopamine can drive learning in opposite directions. So inconsistent with this idea, study in the Parkinson patients have shown that by manipulation the dopamine level bias reinforced learning, can bias reinforced learning. So when dopamine level were elevated by pharmacologically, so patients become much better at learning the positive outcome, but they are worse at the negative outcome. So in my grad school, I was invested the mechanism underlying D2 receptor functions. What we found is that by reducing the D2 receptor signaling, it can increase reward signaling, can also impair the learning from negative consequences. So this suggests that D2 receptor signaling can contribute to maintain a balance between reward pursuit and avoidance. So all this together indicate that dopamine as a key neurosubstance for reinforcement learning. So if dopamine is important for reinforcement learning, then the property of the reward signal should influence how efficiently learning is occur. So before I turn into experiments, I want to ask what the classic reinforcement learning model predicts. So in the classic TD reinforcement learning, the value estimation is updated on each trial based according to this equation. So there are two parameters particularly important: the reward magnitude here and also the learning rate. So the learning rate here determines how much the value estimation change after each trial experiment. And by increased alpha, we can allow the model to reach its final value more quickly. So in other hands, when we increase the reward magnitude here, it can only change the final value, change only what the final value is learned, but it does not change how many trials they are required to reach these values. So when we do a simulation, what we find is that increased reward from 1 to 10, it can produce a large value estimation. But you can see from here, the learning trajectory occur over the same number of trials. And in the meantime, when we increase alpha here, we can increase the learning, can increase the convergency. So this classical reinforcement learning make a clear prediction that by reward magnitude change what is learned, but not how efficiently it is learned. So this led me to ask the basic question. The previous basic question is like, does the brain actually represent a large difference in reward magnitudes? So since the dopamine function as a teaching signal, so one might expect that animal with larger dopamine response to reward to learn faster. So to test this idea, previous in the lab by Luke have examined dopamine activity during this Pavlovian condition task. So in these naive mice were placed in on an accelerometer, and they are present an auditory cue followed by 1 second delay of rewards. So as the animal learns association, they develop this anticipatory linking during the delay period. So when they recording the dopamine release in the nucleus accumbens, you can show that animals have different natural variability in their magnitude reward response. So when animals were separated based on dopamine response, you can see a surprising patterns. The animal with smaller reward evoked dopamine response can develop a much stronger cue evoked licking behaviors. However, the animal with a larger dopamine response show a much weaker cue response. So this finding challenged the simple idea that larger domain response always produce stronger learning. So instead, it suggests that domain may regulate learning in more complex and adaptive ways. So this is also correlations, and then it's like whether we can manipulate the domain to change the learnings. So similarly, look in experiments, what he found is that mice receive a brief light cue followed by 1 second later optogenetic stimulation. So there are two stimulation conditions. So in the uncalibrated stimulations, the stimulation intensity was fixed. So in this case, it can result a different domain amplitude across animals. So in the calibrated conditions, stimulation will adjust so that the domain response were matched and maintained at a relatively small amplitude. So key finding here is that the cue response increased only in the uncalibrated group, but for the calibrated group, it showed little improvement. So this indicates that simply activation domain neuron was not efficient. So the magnitude of the domain signal determine whether it could effectively change the reinforced learning. So this finding suggests that domain is not an all or none teaching signal. So its teaching efficiency depends on the domain signal magnitude. So since the domain is dependent on the magnitude, we want to know whether can the natural reward generate the domain signal of different magnitudes. So previous study in the Yoshita's lab have examined domain response across a relatively small range from like 0.1 to 20 microliters. And what they find is that domain response appear to saturated. But the thing I want to mention is that because this reward size only represent only like a small fraction of animal daily consumptions, so we want to ask that whether domain response could still scale when we extend to a much larger broad range of rewards. So what we did here is like we use a head-fixed mice and domain sensor. We measure domain response to reward ranging from like 5 microliter up to 100 microliter, which can mimic the daily consumptions. So interesting, what we found that domain response continue to increase across this extended range. And also the large rewards produce both a large and long-lasting domain transient. And when we plot the Hill function curve, we can see it's not saturated, and it can still have this long-lasting effects. So the lasting rewards, the largest reward produce sustained domain plateaus during the consumptions. So this suggests that domain activity reflect not only the reward delivered, but also ongoing the reward consumption. So this demonstrates that domain can encoding large difference in reward magnitudes across a much broader range of broad range. So this leads to the central question, like, does the reward magnitude itself determine reinforced learning efficiency? So in reinforced learning models, learning is described by an internal value estimation. So however, the value is latent variables, so we cannot directly measure it. Instead, we can measure behavior that reflects these internal values, such when we use the anticipatory behaviors. So the question we first want to answer is like, how should we quantify learning efficiency from behaviors? So in the field, one common approach is like to measure how quickly the behavior can cross a predefined thresholds. However, this measurement cannot distinguish these two possibilities. So a large reward can increase the magnitude of behavior. So in this case, it can cross the threshold much earlier. In the meantime, when there is a fast learning rate, it can also produce a much earlier threshold crossing. So to separate these effects, so in this paper, we define learning efficiency as the trial number required to reach the asymptotic behaviors. So the stable maximal level of performance here. So in this case, if a large reward allow animal to reach asymptotic behavior faster, it would suggest that reward magnitude itself can change the learning process. So with this definition of learning efficiency, now we can ask a question like, does increased reward magnitude can change the learning rates? So to test this, We first put animal in a freely moving Pavlovian condition task. So mice receive a predict cue followed by a delayed reward. So this allows us to measure how quickly they learn the cue reward associations. So there are two separate group of mice. They either receive a standard reward or much larger rewards. What we find is that animals receive the large rewards learn fast. So only after only 3 training sessions, the animal receive like 200 rewards can show a fast queued reward collection compared to the standard group. And also the large rewards also produce a large domain response to the predict queues here. So this result said that the increased reward magnitude here does not simply increase the final value of the outcome. Instead, it can accelerate the learning from learning about the formation of the cue reward association and can enhance the domain response to the predict cue. And based on those results, and another important question is like, could this effect due to simple reflect improvement in performance or increase motivation, or it could be rather be a true change in learning efficiency? So to distinguish learning from performance effects, we perform another experiment. So in this case, a total amount of rewards animal receive per session was matched between groups. So under this design, the both group of mice experience the same total rewards, but the reward distribution is different. And what we find is that we no longer see observed like a difference in the learning, the efficiency of learning in the cue reward collection behaviors, but we find that the larger domain reward group still show a fast learning of domain in response to the predicted cue. So this suggests that the large reward do not simply make the animal perform better by increased motivation. Instead, it can selectively enhance the learning or the neural repetition associated with the predicted cues here. So far we have discussed the learning in relatively simple Pavlovian settings. However, in the real world, animal can require learning much more complex action strategies. So how do animals learn those behavior from experiments? So to address these questions, we use a previously developed hidden targets foraging task. So in this case, naive mice were placed in a dark, featureless arena, and there is a fixed reward port on the one side of the wall. And somewhere in the arena in the middle, there is invisible target zooms. So the mice receive rewards only when its trajectory passes through this hidden location before it returns to the home port. So another thing that I will mention is there are no external cues to guide its behaviors. So the animal must need to discover the solution through trial and error using only delayed reward feedback here. So what we find is that early in the training, animals show a long exploratory trajectory throughout the arena here. And with experiments, the animal gradually build a structured movement. And a recent computational model captured this in the lab by NADA by representing this behavior as a sequence of the smoothed movement segment conducted by learning the anchor points. So through Bayesian update of successful experiments, the model can produce both speed and structural learning observed here in mice. If you got interested, you can read the model in its papers recently published. So now we have behavior. Now we want to understand how the domain, how the reward magnitude change that. So in this case, there are two separate cohort of mice. They either receive a standard 5 microliter rewards or a large 100 microliter rewards. So you can see here, a large reward group generates a large initial domain peak followed by a prolonged elevation above the baseline. So this reflects that the increase in the magnitude can increase. This means like by increase the domain, by increase the big reward, it can increase the reward magnitude and the duration of the reward experience. As the learning going on, they both decrease in both conditions. So next, we want to quantify the learning efficiency by measure the latency to reach the hidden targets on each successful trials. So when we compare across a range of reward sites from 500 microliter, we found that learning efficiency increased with the reward magnitude. So this effect was especially strong for very large rewards. And we can see from the maximum efficiency reached when the reward exceeded over 50 microliters. So then we quantified other behavior. What we find is that the large reward can lead to much more efficient increase in the consistent and speed of the trajectories, and also can reduce the variabilities across animals. And so these results show that reward magnitude does not simply change the value and outcome. It can directly influence the efficiency of learnings. So one concern that is the improvement in the performance with the large reward is because maybe it can simply reflect a transient increase in the motivation, or rather than a change fast learning. So to address this question, we use a reward downshift experiment. So in this case, mice receive a large 100 microliter rewards only on the first day of trainings, and then they switch back to the standard 5 microliter reward for all the subsequent sessions. So in this case, if a large reward only increases motivation, we expect that performance drop once the reward was decreased. Instead, what we find is the animal can retain their earlier performance advantage and then continue to improvement. So and this ultimately lead to their learning as just as efficient as animal learning learning the large rewards. So this result indicate that large rewards can produce some long-lasting improvement in learning. So you can rather simply trend and increase the motivation or incentive. So the next question we want to ask is like, why learning under standard reward condition is so inefficient? So in many forms of skill learning, and performance does not improve in a single linear manner. So instead, animals often show a gradual improvement across training, and this comes by with some rapid change during the period of this intense practice with the session. So we want to ask whether the reduced learning efficiency in the standard group could be explained by difference in how animals acquire and retain skill during the trainings. So to examine this, we track performance in a block of the 10 successful trials. So we average every 10 successful trials, and both within and the cross-training sessions. So what we find is that in animal training with the standard rewards, we observe a consistent within session dynamic here. So you can, when we zoom into these first two sessions, you can see that the performance initially improved as animal gain experiments. But after when they reach the optimal session, but when they reach the optimal points, their performance gradually declined towards the end of sessions here. So this produces a U-shaped learning profile. And when we quantify that, the other things like one mentioned is like when according to the 40 mice in our hand, we found that the tau, which is the initial learning phase, is very different between animal to animal. So which this might explain to their different learning rates. So when we quantify their like best performance in the early, we will find that most of the mice will have their best performance around like maybe 40%, 30-40% or within a training sessions. So the other thing we noticed that the optimal performance achieved during one session was not fully captured at the beginning of next session. So this said that the standard reward training was limited not only by the speed of this initial learning, but also by the ability to maintain and consolidate improvements across sessions. When we recording from however, when in the domain training with the large reward, they can like have this much higher performance than the previous sessions. So instead, they didn't repeatedly build performance like the standard animals. This animal can continue to improve their performance they already achieved. So this results suggest that large reward improve learning efficiency by promoting more stable acquisitions here, and also retain their behaviors across training sessions. So the third thing we noticed is that after animal reach this within session performance optimal, and their performance gradually decline during the remaining of the sessions. So we want to know what could be this. And so when we average them, we can you can say that they are like continuously. So however, when we compare like animal by animals for their individuals, we found that they didn't have this gradual shift. The animal often show this abrupt transient into a low performance state here. For example, this is latency here. So you can see a broad change from better to worse. And this sudden change resembles some disengaged states observed in other behaviors. So in the other behaviors, animal temporarily reduce their engagement with the task. So in this case, we refer to this event as this state-like disengagement. So you can see from here, animal receive the standard rewards. The disengagement often occur after dopamine reward was declined, but become much more smaller. So they always, when dopamine decline, and they always like disengagement happens. And there are some animals, some sections, there's no crossing, which means the animal didn't have much disengagement. So the occur always the disengagement was highly variable across animals and sessions, you can see. And some animals disengaged frequently, and while others remained engaged throughout the trainings. So when we compare the different work group, we found that the disengagement probability depends strongly on the reward magnitude. So animal receive the standard reward more frequently enter this disengaged state. However, when there is animal receive large rewards, they show little or no evidence of disengagement. So altogether, when we use these three components, the initial learning, the consolidation, and the engagement, all these three can nicely predict animal performance when we combine all the three together. So this indicate that the reward magnitude influence learning not only by change the reinforced learning strength, but it can also regulate when the animal remain engaged and also continue to accumulation the learning experience here. So again, the result was correlational. So we want to know can increase dopamine reward signal also alone can improve learning efficiency. So to test this directly, mice were trained on the same task, use the standard reward instead of big rewards. And however, during reward consumption, VTA dopamine neuron were optogenetic stimulation on most of the trials. So there are two stimulation conditions. So a brief one, which is like mimic the dopamine response produced by these standard rewards. And there is also another prolonged stimulation, which can generate a larger and more sustained dopamine signal similar to the large rewards. So what we find is that by increased dopamine activity can improve the learning efficiency in early stimulation-dependent manners. So animals receive the stronger and longer dopamine stimulation show a fast and improvement during the earlier trainings. So this suggests that the sustained dopamine can help animal to remain engaged during learnings. One thing that we couldn't find is that the consolidation, that's the optimal capture was not fully changed by simulation, so they are on the same. So which indicates that the large reward may be potentially activation other system instant dopamine system to do these consolidations. And this result suggests that dopamine reward magnitude is not only correlated with learning efficiency, it can causally enhance the acquisition of skill behaviors. So the previous experiments showed the large rewards improve learning efficiency in the spatial navigation task. So we next want to ask how general this effect is. And more specifically, we want to know whether reward magnitude could influence learning in a much more traditional reinforced learning setting, which can involve in some goal direct action and physical efforts. So to test this idea, we use a reach and pull joystick task we developed in the lab. So in this case, head fixed mice were presented with a joystick, and they have to reach and grab the joystick and pull the joystick beyond a threshold to receive a delayed reward. And also, the difficulty of the task was not controlled by the change in the difficulty of the task was controlled by changing the required pulling force. So it can ranging from really easy one to the animal maximal abilities. So what we find is the animal naive mice will initially struggle with this high force trial and require extensive training to improve this. Again, there are two group of mice were compared. one received the standard reward. And another group, we didn't use the big reward for all the trials. We only have some occasional large rewards interleaved through the trainings. So what we find here is that animals receive occasionally large rewards can show much faster improvement and achieve higher success rates here. And they are also show a higher, faster improvements and achieve higher success rates, and also especially on these difficult after trials. Again, those are like correlational. We want to know whether domain enhancement could reproduce these effects. So similar to the hidden task locations, we use two stimulation, prolonged and brief stimulation, and this prolonged VT stimulation can induce this long-lasting domain response. So what we find here is that again, when we give stimulation, prolonged domain stimulation can increase the learning and also increase success rates. Another thing that I want to mention is that this increase is not due to increased movements, because when we quantify their final behavior vigors, we didn't find any difference between these two control and the stimulation mice. So they are reaching the asymptotic behavior on the same level, final levels. So which indicates that the domain is only increase their learning efficiency here. So finally, we ask that whether the benefit of the large reward extend to some more complex and slow learning behavior paradigm. So because most behavior I show you before is about that we develop in our lab. So we want to test in other field and see what most people use in the field. So in this case, we implanted the International Brain Laboratory this sensory motor decision task. So in this case, animal have to roll in the wheels. So there are two like signal on the left or right screens, and animal when there's left, the animal to rotate the wheel to the center, and when they're on the right, they need to the left. So there are different signal strengthness. So this task provide an important task because learning performance is highly variable across this animal, because when the huge data from the IBL lab, and also the previous protocol used some really small reward size because they want to increase the number of trainings. So in this case, we're training the animal using the standard rewards or the interleaved large rewards, and compare their learning efficiency with this large existing dataset from multiple laboratories. So there are over 100 mice or from multiple labs. So this is the data we analyze from their data and see, show their learning is very slow. And on the other hand, we also do it, and we find our animal within this few animal we find this within this range. However, animal receive this large reward, learn the task much efficiently, both in the in the learning. And the other thing I want to mention is the benefit of large rewards was not limited to these fast acquisitions. You can see that large reward also show improvement in the expert performance. So you can see the animal have better decision accuracy. They have few laps and also reduced size bias. So in addition, the performance variability were reduced compared to the control group. So this result indicates that the increased reward magnitude can improve not only the speed of learning, but it can also change the stability and the reliability of the learning behavior across this diverse reinforced learning task. So far we have shown that the large reward can strengthen enhance learning in navigation, motor skill learning, and decision-making tasks. But one thing we want to know is like, does this increased reward magnitude improve all forms of learnings? So to test this, we examine a classic Pavlovian tracing condition. So mice learn three different conditions, auditory cues. So one predicts standard rewards, and one predicts no reward, and one predicts with a large reward. And there are two groups of mice were compared. one group receive a moderate large, like this moderate one large rewards, and the other receive a very large rewards. So as you can see here, in the standard group mice can rapidly learn the discrimination between cues here, and both in the domain response and also their behaviors. And especially you can see there's a negative domain response when expected reward was omitted. However, when we test the extremely large reward group, what we find is that they show different patterns. So all of this animal can develop a strong domain response to reward delivery. But the presence of this extremely large reward did not further accelerate, change the cue discrimination learnings here, as you can see. So instead, this large reward disrupts the formation of the clear cue representations. So animals showed a reduced discrimination between reward predictive and non-reward prediction, and this weak anti-predicting behaviors. So at the neural level, the large reward group show its enhanced response to the reward delivery, but not respond to the domain expression associated with the reward emissions. So this indicates that the very large reward do not simply enhance all forms of learnings, and their effects depend on the behavior context and also the computational demands of the task. So to summary, so this study challenged one of the fundamental assumptions in the reinforcement learning fields, that the reward magnitude determines the value, but not the speed of learning. So across multiple behavior paradigms here, include navigation, motor skill learning, and decision making, and this large reward can consistently accelerate the acquisition of the complex behaviors. So the mechanism seems to involve in domain because large reward can produce this larger and more sustained domain response during reward consumption. And when artificially stimulation the domain signal, we can it is sufficient to improve learning efficiency, can reduce the disengagement here. So this suggests that domain does not simply encode reward prediction errors. So during initial learning, domain may act as an adaptive learning rate signal that can determine how efficient animal update their behaviors. However, the effect reward magnitudes are not universals. Large reward can enhance action learning, but could not but in the other hand, it can disrupt some formation of the Pavlovian cue discrimination. So let's say that the reward can influence different learning systems in different ways. So overall, this work suggests that the magnitude reward is powerful regulator of reinforcement learning efficiency, and also suggests that it can also incorporate some adaptive learning rate into the model of the animal learnings. With that, I want to thank everyone in lab and also the team in the Genenias. That'd be it. If you guys have any question, let me know.